You are watching Omnis Protocol, and this is a Star Wars Shatterpoint Battle Report with commentary from the EVergreen Open, which just took place this last weekend, featuring two fantastic players. We've got Donovan, who's local for me, who has made top 8. This is the first round of top 8. Very strong local player, always gives me difficult games. And then also has Chris, who's coming down from Vancouver, British Columbia, to represent for Canada. So fantastic game. I'm really excited to get into it. Let's cover real quick what the matchup is. Looks like they are playing on Sabotage, and Donovan is playing Gideon with DTE and Dark Troopers, so just the normal Gideon box, plus Grand Inquisitor, Third Sister, and Fifth Brother. So basically just playing two boxes, but kind of combining two really powerful primaries with a great mix of other Imperial options. And then Chris is playing Andor with Ezra and Bazin Chirrut, with Princess Leia Charming to the last, and Sabine with Rebel Commando. So definitely a mix and match here, not something that, probably is all that surprising. A lot of very strong characters here. Sabine doesn't tend to get a lot of love, but she is also a character that can jump when given a dash by Leia, or when the reposition is granted, it wouldn't be a reposition, it'd be an advance from Andor, she could actually turn that into a jump. So that's really interesting, and it also provides another way of moving a character, which is not always something that Rebels get from their secondary slot. So interesting choice there. I'm very excited to see this game play out in its entirety. I was able to check out here and there. I was able to watch parts of this game, so I'm very excited to record on it. So I think it's time we just get into it and see how this game unfolds. All right. So Chris is playing the Rebels side of this, and Donovan obviously has got the Imperial side. Sabotage, I'm fairly confident, was Donovan's mission, and he won priority. It looks like he is starting with the Shatterpoint card so that he gets to start off with really whoever he wants. Obviously, my Shatterpoint show is now rarely reserved, and I think we all kind of have an attitude around here that if you don't have to spend force to reserve something, you really probably shouldn't. Take advantage of, what you've got in almost every situation. So it looks like he's starting off with Gideon, which obviously, I don't pretend to be an expert on playing Empire, but I think it's a very interesting choice, and I'm not sure who I would have picked to go first here. But I think having an option for Gideon to get up the board early is a really big deal. It helps. He can just be a really bad activation if you have to pull him late. So it looks like he's chosen to get Gideon all the way up the board, and then he had started him in range to dash Fifth Brother, and then he's doing Long Live the Empire. So that's a strong start to start off with the tiebreaker on both sides. If I were in Chris's shoes in this moment, that would certainly worry me. I'm sure Donovan has practiced this sort of start before, and so he had this in mind, no doubt. So it does put a couple of damage on Fifth Brother, but he's still super tanky and is not necessarily going to go down. So, very strong opening from Donovan. I like that a lot. I think if you're watching this and you're thinking, I want to play more Gideon, I would probably build around having an option for an opening like that, because that's intimidating on Sabotage for sure. So Chris has pulled the Rebel Commandos for his first card, and he's questioning whether or not that's the right play at the moment, but he's only playing a 5-force list, and he's playing against Gideon, which, as we know, increases the cost to reserve by 1. So my personal feelings is, unless it literally loses you the game, I don't think I would reserve against Gideon, in this matchup at the very least. You just don't have very much force. So, all right, looks like he is choosing to go with the with those rebel commandos, starting off with the commando doctrine, which gives them a dash, and then as long as one of them ends one of those dashes within range 4 of an enemy character, they get to get a free focus action. So he is elected to only move one of them forward so far, one of them staying on that back objective, and they're just both taking shots at Fifth Brothers. Sounds like Chris rolled 3 expertise, 2 hits, or the 3 expertise becomes 2 hits. Donovan blocks 3, ends up with 3 going through overall. So they end up with 2 damage, 2 shoves, and a pin, which after steadfast and protection is going to be 1 damage, pin, 1 shove. So right now what they're trying to figure out is whether or not Fifth Brother can be shoved off that point. And so they actually called me over for help with this. They were also asking me here about checking angles beforehand. This is not something that people think about that often, but technically you're not supposed to check angles until you have declared the thing that's actually going to do the shove. So you shouldn't be positioning and then trying to get into the right spot, checking the angle constantly. Yeah. So in this particular case, he was kind of like behind the crate. You can kind of see it on the screen. There's a dark red crate that was right next to the Fifth Brother, and that made it so the one shove had to be at an angle that didn't quite get Fifth Brother off the point. So nice placement. You never know when, as the TO, when you're setting down crates, you never know which ones are going to be super impactful, but that's pretty huge for a steadfast character like Fifth Brother. I'd be very curious to ask Donovan in retrospect if he deployed very specifically about having Fifth Brother on that side of the table for because of that particular crate. All right. Looks like the other commando does go far enough down to get 2 shoves, so that does get Fifth Brother off the point. Now the commandos are doing their normal move action, and that one is moving up to take the point and also utilizing that box for potentially cover. But definitely doesn't help Chris as much as potentially making it more difficult to shove off a point. And then the other Rebel Commando is just using his movement just to back up just a little bit. Okay. So that does mean that Chris scores 3. Donovan now pulls Gideon, which, if you hadn't already Shatterpointed, you would probably be very happy about. But in this case, he definitely wants anyone but Gideon. Yeah. Overall, Fifth Brother ends up with 5 damage on him. So he had 2 already on him, and then took 3 after protection over the course of those 2 attacks. Okay. Getting Reva here, a lot of people may not have experience with her, because prior to the update, she really wasn't seeing a lot of play. But now this is quite good, because... So right now, they're both like, it's top 8. They're just trying to double check what they can and cannot do. Donovan was just double checking that he is allowed to put down the range tool just to kind of check a range 1 hunker, and then how far, does the dash or the advanced tool get him going afterwards. And you are absolutely allowed to put down 1 of each tool. It's being slightly obscured by the gantry, so you guys can't quite see that. But he's just kind of trying to get an idea of about how far he thinks he can go. Yeah, so he does end up taking a hunker under the gantry, which is, like I said, kind of obscured, and then going to do an advance. and then she jumps over to the other ladder. What he's trying to do here is, because of the slight angle of the gantry, so no attacks were made. But the reason why they're flipping the point is because they both have one character on the point, and fifth brother is still contesting the objective, but not on the same level. But that still allows him to break the tie because he is there and he has the tiebreaker. Inquisitorial Mandate is, I believe, the name of it. All right, so that does mean that Donovan also scores... No, Donovan scores 4. He does not score 3. So that is a very strong breakpoint for this mission, the fact that he was immediately able to score 4 compared to Chris's 3, so this isn't constantly just shuffling back to 0 to create a momentum advantage. So Chris pulls Cassian. Sweet promo down there. I don't have that one yet, but it's on my radar. I got to get me a Cassian promo one of these days. Okay. So it looks like he's immediately using Cassian's ability to dash a rebel and then dash himself, and he has chosen to do it on Princess Leia. Princess Leia is a spy. So that means that both of them should get a hunker token after this. You can't quite see it at this angle of the camera, but there is a full-length ladder attached to the side of that high ground, and so that's what he's utilizing here. He kind of put Leia max range away from it so that Cassian could also fit. And so, yep, it does look like he went ahead and added the hunkers. Doesn't come up a whole ton. A lot of times, Cassian might be just dashing Ezra or something and doesn't get the spy bonus. But, man, the hunkers can sometimes really matter, so do not forget about that ability. All right. Cassian, I think we all agree, very powerful character, but is not known for having the most impactful activations. All right, so he is taking a shot. I can't see exactly which tree he's on at the moment for this. Oh, he has flipped all the way. This is the better shove side, but less dice. So he's gone 7 dice. So he has not done, we've all done terrible things. I mean, I would do terrible things to Rebel Commandos, but you got to be very conservative about your damage here. But there is an interesting strategy that I've been realizing with these revenge lists, that it might be worthwhile to put some damage on your characters, because you can put your opponent in a position where they have to deal damage to get to their shove. And if you don't have very much health left, that can force your opponent to give you revenge triggers when really all they want to do is shove. So obviously, I'm not saying it's always the right thing it's not always the right thing to do to damage your characters, but there are bonuses to that in a revenge list for sure. Cassian, interestingly enough, did not roll a normal hit, so his hit to crit did nothing. Yeah. So what they're doing here is he's trying to figure out if he has a shove angle that will get Reva off the point, and there's also the factor that there's fifth brother there, and it's only one shove. Yeah. Yep. I love this communication between the two players, where they're both trying to assist each other to just get a really accurate game state and go, you agree that I shove you here, you hit this edge. I love seeing that from players. That's just really clean, like co-opetitive sort of play where both people are just like, hey, let's just have a really clean board state and help both people get there. I love that. So ended up doing 3 damage on Third Sister, but Cassian is just really hurt by the fact that he did not roll a hit, and otherwise if one of the dice had been a crit, or sorry, had just been a hit, he would have become a crit and he would have gotten enough down that he would have gotten the second shove and been able to get her off the point. So now he advances down with his normal movement. but he is nowhere near the ingress point. I didn't see earlier, like, if there was a world where I missed if he shoved himself and then got the full movement. Yeah, that's tough. If he had gone one more down, I think he would have gotten everything that he wanted. He would have gotten Reva off the point and been able to shove Cassian off the gantry to a spot where he could have like advanced to the ladder and had two people on the point, which would have been a much stronger position. So I do think Shatterpoint in a lot of cases comes down to how do you facilitate your opponent being one success short or getting your characters to that key one success breakpoint. So that's a rough turn for Chris for sure. He only scores 2. So now it looks like Donovan had pulled the DTE, the Dark Death Trooper Escort, which has been a go-to character for him for a long time. He moves Fifth Brother back up onto the point with the tactic. And then looks like he just moved to a ladder and then hunkered, not taking attacks. He's playing against a double revenge list. I think in Donovan's mind, he is not going to win this with kills. He's going to win this on dominating the points, utilizing his tiebreakers and forcing Chris to roll dice and see if it's enough. And so hunkered Death Trooper could easily mean that they don't go down far enough. The Rebel Commandos have already gone, so one of the best sources of pin from his list has already gone. So we got Sabine. So first thing that Sabine does is she uses the free dash for Cassian to go ahead and get him onto that point. One of the things, I just got to shout out AMG. I always love the exact size of their terrain for the most part. You notice how the two models can kind of perfectly fit on that gantry. You can see Reva and Cassian right next to each other. I think that kind of thing is a really subtle choice that maybe not all the 3D printers think about when they're designing their gantries and such, but making so both can fit on it is great. Okay. So no free focus because there's not enough specters in this list. So she's just rolling 6 dice into Reva. Modifying expertise to give a crit and a hit. Donovan rolls 3 blocks. But that means that only the crit is going to go through, which is going to be 2 damage. So yeah, unfortunately, this is another rough activation for Chris because Sabine ends up taking just as much damage as Third Sister does, because it only did 2 damage, and then Third Sister uses Deflect to deal 2 damage to Sabine. So right now, they're not taking the point, but Sabine does still have a potential jump. The question is she going to be able to fit somewhere? Now, Cassian is kind of blocking the only spot that Sabine could have gotten to, is what it looks like. The token at the moment, if you've forgotten, is kind of just under Reva. You can see this, like the kind of crescent of it peeking out just a little bit. So Chris is debating, like, if you spend the force here and then you can't fit her, that's rough. There is a world where characters die from the explosion, because her jump has oh, he's going for it. He is spending the force. It is optional, and it would potentially deal damage to Cassian and Rebel Commandos. On hers, it's definitely optional. I think he has consigned himself to accepting that Sabine is not going to fit. Right now, he is debating whether or not he's willing to roll the explosion and deal damage to Cassian, Commandos, Rebel Commandos, Reva, and Fifth Brother. And so he's rolling it. Yeah. 1 expertise. Yeah. So only gets 1 damage across the board. So not bad, but doesn't get him a key wound. He's trying to utilize the ladder. He does not fit, and so he's going to end where he was next to the ladder. I respect. I think in my heart, I think trying to roll for the damage was the right call. You already kind of know that Donovan is going for shoves and stuff. So again, softening up your characters could be optimal here. So in the end, that's another turn where Chris only scores 2. So I would not be feeling great in the moment in Chris's place. But Chris is a fantastic player. And so I can tell just like listening to them talk to each other, Chris is still 100% mentally in this. And he is not going to, he's not going to give anything free to Donovan. So Donovan did pull the Dark Troopers. Man, Donovan is just stacking these points. It's actually even a little interesting here where if I were in Donovan's shoes, I'd be thinking a little bit about reinforcing my back points. Because if you just over reinforce the middle, the Rebels list does have the ability to kind of cross the board. And so I think there's potential for him to potentially lose his back points if he's not careful. So I missed who that attack was into. I think it was probably Rebel Commando. That seems right. So looks like just 1 crit goes through, which is a damage and a shove, which ends up being on the Rebel Commando. So I was standing nearby. They're like, hey, we got a tight shove. Do you want to tell us if it clears the model or not? Yeah. Yeah. So from the angle where I was sitting, you can't really tell on this overhead view, but looking from the side, I could see that the range tool was definitely going past the gantry, and there was nothing on the bottom that would stop the Rebel Commando from landing. So it was clear to me from the side that the Rebel Commando could be shoved off. Okay. And so then he just resolves the move action, moves that Dark Trooper up onto that point. All right, we got a Shatterpoint card. It's one of the new ones. He's got the Kiadi Mundi Shakti box Shatterpoint card. Very cool. Those were being handed out to the event. Everybody in this GT got one. Curious if you guys are watching this right now, I would be curious, who do you Shatterpoint in this moment? Because this is a very critical turn for Chris, and you pull the Shatterpoint, which is I think what you want, because you got to dig yourself out of a hole here. So I'm super curious who he's going to come up with, and he is deciding to do Baze and Chirrut. So you get a Force Refresh. Baze and Chirrut are a fantastic Shatterpoint with Cassian. Yeah. Yeah. And so they're refreshing another force because of sabotage. So now he's going to use the movement ability first, Because Baze and Shoot are a very interesting character where they have a different movement ability depending on which side they're on. They're rewarded for flipping stances by getting a free focus action. And then they have different abilities, steadfast versus cover, sharpshooter versus impact, depending on which side of their stance card they're on. So we wanted to start off by giving them both of them the dash. The other side is just a reposition for one of them. You can see on this table, I've sort of marked where the ingress points are with that red black outlined rectangle, which I think should help you as a viewer to kind of like see what's going on a little bit. And it helps people who've never played on my tables before. This definitely has a lot of ingress points. I'm sure there's going to be some comments. There's too many ingress points. But players always seem to enjoy playing on a table like this, and I love seeing people getting to the points, making impact. So, all right, so Baze and Shroot get up there with Gideon and the DTE. All right, it looks like only Baze was in range of the Death Trooper escort, and so he's going to go ahead and make a melee attack on him. That crate is a huge help for Gideon staying on that point, because obviously you'd probably be preferring to attack Gideon. Yeah, so it looks like for Donovan, he had 2 blocks, 2 expertise, and a fail. So the 2 expertise become 1 block. So net is 3 blocks. They're removing 3 hits. That still seems like a good... So that's still a full tree for Baze. Baze does not let you down. They're just kind of talking through the DTE abilities, and so Donovan's reminding him, I have protection, do not have steadfast, but obviously there is the ability for him to spend a force and potentially come back on a point. I'm sneaking over here to grab a picture of Baze and Shroot fighting with Gideon and DTE. Too cool of a shot. So it ends up being 5 damage, pin, and a shove, which is really kind of perfect in this situation. Get DTE softened up, and he's pinned, so his ability to move back on a point is not super helpful. Kind of really everything that Chris could want, especially when you're feeling a little pressure, feeling a little behind. That was definitely the kind of a role that kind of gets you back into things, kind of rebuild some of that confidence, and you're like, yes, all right, I've got a plan. All right. Now it is time for Chirrut to do his cool cane attack. Yeah. So right now they're kind of discussing what are the chances that he could shove. And I think they're both agreeing that a shove is probably impossible, but might as well take some damage. This is, it's always interesting when you're playing a list that has 0 revenge, because there's like no consequence for getting wounds. So it looks... Donovan has 1 block, and then the expertise becomes 2 blocks and a crit to fail. After modifying for all the expertise, he got 2 crits and a strain. Just waiting for confirmation. Yeah, so basically all the hits end up being blocked. 1 crit becomes a fail, so it's just 1 crit goes through plus the strain from expertise. So that attack didn't do a whole lot, but that's kind of the order that you want it. You know, you wanted the attack to spike on Death Trooper Escort, and you weren't going to get a ton done on Gideon anyway. All right. That does allow Chris to score 3. You can ignore the tape in the corner. I was trying to keep it out of the video as much as possible, but the GoPro is plugged into a battery pack just in case. And I was just a little nervous that someone might walk by, knock it over, and send the whole camera out of position. So Donovan's asking who they still have left. Yeah. So it seems like Bazin Chirrut is still in his deck, and Leia's still in the deck, and Ezra's still in the deck. Donovan is trying to decide whether it's time for Gideon, and it looks like it is. So he uses the free dash on the DTE to get rid of Pin. He spends 1 force for Long Live the Empire. Looks like on the Dark Trooper. Getting work done with the Long Live the Empire. Yep. And then he's just going to focus and make a big melee attack into Chirrut. Man, attacking Donnie Yen. Donnie is attacking Donnie. I'm not sure how I feel about this. This looks like Chirrut's got 4 blocks after expertise plus a dash. So he ends up with just a crit going through, so it's going to be 2 damage and strain. Yeah. Yeah. That was factoring in, sounds like it was factoring in coordinated fire. Yeah. So he is not going to dash. Yeah. Yeah, so it's 3 damage after the coordinated fire strain. So it sounds like Chirrut is going to go ahead and... All right. This is where things got complicated. So they both have 2 guys on the point. And here we were kind of deliberating, is there a separate timing window for Bazin Chirrut's thing? And so there's kind of a whole like discussion window where we're kind of like, how is this exactly going to play out? And so one of the first questions I had, like I hadn't considered this prior to the event, but was it actually a tie was my first question, right? Because if it's not a tie and Donovan wins, then that ability wouldn't trigger. Rereading the Gideon card, I'm realizing, it specifically says if it's a tie, you take control of it. So it would still be a tie. And so we're kind of working our way through kind of like, how do we resolve this? I'm trying to search real quick and see if there was any ruling regarding them. And so it was kind of just like an interesting thing because I couldn't find any rulings on them yet. And so I wasn't even sure I was searching correctly. I was like, there's got to be something that comes up for these guys, but just hasn't really been ruled on yet. So it's going to just be a little bit because in this moment, we're kind of like talking it through. This is a top 8 game. I really want to be careful with how we rule something. And I'm just trying to make sure I take in all of the information. I will tell you right now, the way that it ended up being ruled, which still takes me a minute to get there, is that it's going to work just like an enemy tiebreaker is on the point, but you have to spend a force for it. And so in this case, because Donovan is the active player, Gideon would break the tie and take control of the objective. Then, at that point, Baze and Cherut's ability would now trigger. They are tying the point, but Donovan has control of the objective. So that means that Donovan, like, they can then remove the control token. And so takes a little bit to get there, just because it is weird. And like, I never really know. And this is not to say that like I definitively know what the answer is, because who knows what AMG will rule on in the long run. This is just what we are going with in the moment based on prior rulings. And so if you're going to play Baze and Cherut, I would just keep an eye on the Atomic Mass Games rules forum for when we potentially have like something official on this. So, yeah, interesting. So while this is kind of continuing, I just want to kind of like look at the existing matchup. Like, I think we can probably all agree that Donovan is still in an advantage spot, but with how this is going to play out, he is not actually going to get that point this activation. So he's only going to score 3. But at this point, like, Donovan's scoring 3 or 4 every turn. So he's still in a really good spot. It's interesting. I'm not sure whether or not having Ezra involved sooner would be helpful here, right? You have Ezra, and like, just Ezra can't be everywhere, and Donovan just has more tiebreaker models, which is very interesting. So, very, very, very cool game. I considered kind of like cutting this chunk of the video out, but I thought I would just leave it in because, you know, sometimes you just have this stuff come up. Like, you're playing fairly new models. Jin came out 2 weeks ago, roughly, something like that at this point, maybe 2.5 weeks. Yeah. All right. So Donovan only scored 3. Now it is time for Ezra. Yeah. They were about ready to move on. I was still in a spot where I wanted to be really confident on the ruling, and we have some flexibility in the exact time for each round, because we had kind of allocated 2.5 hours. And so this is actually a fine moment for me to mention this. I did speed up this video just a little bit, because it was on the longer side, and I know people get impatient with videos. And so I sped it up just a touch. So you might go, oh, that seems kind of tight for when Mission Critical comes up. But I just thought, we could probably dial up the speed just a touch. I think it's maybe like 10%. So, yeah. Overall, I will definitely say Cassian was out in force at this event, realizing that almost all of the recorded games do have Cassian in it somewhere, and there's a couple of Cassian mirrors. He's been impactful, but it was really interesting that he's paired with so many different things. We saw him paired with Leia. We saw him paired with Kanan. We saw him paired with Cad Bane. And I think there's even a couple other ones as well. He just is a really, really versatile primary that can fit into a lot of spots. And we're in a world where you might see a Riff Cassian list that's like more of a scoundrel list than anything else. Yeah. Yeah. Overall, very, very cool game. I think we're hitting the point now where I'm like, all right, I haven't been able to find anything like absolutely confirming one way or another online from AMG. So we're gonna move on with the tiebreaker rule as it stands and assume that Baze and Cherut are operating in that tiebreaker. So So Donovan only scores 3. There ends up being no control token on that objective. Okay. Chris is going to go ahead and start his turn. He has already flipped Ezra. Yeah. Rebels are definitely raising a lot of questions just in general. All right. It looks like Ezra's going to do a full advance. Yeah. And then spending a force for the jump. All right. Looks like we're probably going to see Ezra take a lightsaber to someone. All right. Ezra's putting a 7 dice melee attack into the Dark Trooper that's kind of in between Baze and Chirrut. Looks like... So 3 expertise from Donovan. So that becomes 2 blocks, so a total of 3 blocks. Ezra totally whiffs then. Only had 3 hits. Yeah. Tiebreaker stuff doesn't factor in here because it's 3-2. All right. So that's a score for 3 for Chris and a momentum. Now it is Fifth Brother. Interesting. This is probably not what he wants at the moment. But maybe there's a world where he takes the back point with Fifth Brother. Interesting. Where do you... He's only got 2 force left, so he probably doesn't want to reserve. Well, I suppose Grand Inquisitor doesn't really need a force, so he probably could reserve if he wanted to. He could certainly go for the back point because it doesn't look like Leia's on it at the moment. And there's just a Rebel Commando there. Yeah. Now they're talking about how neither side has any wounds. A lot of damage spread around, especially on the Empire side, but not quite enough to actually lock in a wound. So I love these really close, interesting games. They're just reviewing, and it looks like Baze and Chirrut and Leia are the last 2 cards, which I think is good for Rebels. Like, when you get to close out with 2 of the strongest activations in your deck, that's a big deal. Yeah. All right. Looks like he is going to activate Fifth Brother. So he's double checking that Leia was not on that point, which she is not. Fifth Brother is going to go ahead and punch Cassian. So this is a really interesting respective moment. Well, let's talk attack dice for a second. So expertise becomes a crit and a damage. Cassian has 2 blocks and a heal. So big attack from Fifth Brother. Donovan's talking about now how he doesn't actually want to full tree into Cassian. So he ends up doing 5 damage, strain, and 2 shoves into Cassian. Like the clean measuring there. Get a good angle check. Players being helpful with each other, trying to get the other shove resolved. Leaving Cassian on 1 and strained is not his favorite spot. Or 8. But he did get a heal on the expertise, so he removes the strain. So Fifth Brother walks across. This is also something that people often forget, that you can totally, even if there's no gantry or something underneath you, as long as the movement tool goes all the way across, you can walk to a different spot that was on the same elevation, which he does. There's a ladder there, so he uses that to go up and then break the tie against the Rebel Commando. Baze and Shrewd is coming up, but I wanted to talk about how it was an interesting, subtle choice earlier on for where he put Cassian versus where he put Leia, which he should have done it in reverse, right? And we didn't think about that in the moment. Seemed totally fine, but if Leia had taken the Cassian spot and Cassian had taken the Leia spot, Leia would have been contesting that objective. So, very, very interesting. Chris was just talking about how he was debating whether or not to reserve and realizing he only has one force. So he actually has to do Baze and Chirrut. The power of Gideon's reserve denial. Yeah. Yeah. Someone was asking about the ruling with Baze and Chirrut. And so Chris is a very verbose individual, loves talking gaming, loves talking all the nerd stuff. He's a super fun guy to be around. Ended up getting to have dinner with him at least one of the nights. All right, he spends a force for the dash. They do take 3 strain damage. All right, so Chirrut has moved down, so it seems like he's going for Donovan's back points now. And then, yeah. Okay, so Baze is not moving at all. Chirrut's taking the back point. Okay. Chirrut is shooting the Dark Trooper. Let's see. Yeah. Flipping the card for the free focus before making any attacks. All right, this one's going to be 8 dice. So it looks like 3 blocks from Donovan. After expertise, he gained 2 crits and a pin. So it looks like 3 crits and a pin go through. So good Chirrut bow shot. Yeah. Well, they realize that Dark Troopers are immune to pin. Looks like ends up taking 2 damage after protection, disarm, and expose. And now melee attack from Baze. Bad roll from Donovan, 1 expertise, but Thea's exposed. So basically no blocks from Donovan because he was exposed and rolled 4 fails. But that is a lot of fails. It looks like he only ends up going 2 down. So, man, Dark Troopers alive on 1. Yeah, so that's a rough spot for Chris. This is where now the tiebreaker works in reverse. Baze's ability would trigger first. But in this case, the Gideon tiebreaker would go after Baze and shoot, so he elects to not spend the force since he's not going to control the objective. And, yeah. Oh, it actually doesn't even matter here because they're not both on the point, so that doesn't matter. But Ezra's there, so it's just Ezra breaks the tie, and then Gideon breaks the tie. So, a little simpler. All right, last activation of Donovan's first shuffle. GI is sitting back there. And the part I'd be nervous about for Donovan's position is he's just stacking up a lot of damage on his characters, and he doesn't have any of those like Rax, Bo-Katan, Hera sort of characters that can kind of refresh you a little bit. I mean, I guess GI can do it, but it requires wounding. So my gut is that GI is going to... I think that GI wants to take the point from Chirrut, but he also has the problem that the tie is going to work the opposite direction for Donovan on this turn, so he would lose that point if he doesn't get someone there. Yeah. So that's what makes this turn kind of complicated because he wants to score 4, but he really has to work on 2 points because of the tiebreaker mechanic and how it'll swing back for Chris. So free dash there. He goes up a ladder. And then he uses the other side of his tactic just to get Reva away from the edge. He didn't really feel like he had a better character to move there. Yeah. No. There's also a world where he could have moved Fifth Brother. I don't know if he had checked earlier to make sure that Fifth Brother wasn't one shove off, but it seems like there probably is a spot. And you know that Leia's activating soon. But maybe he's just accepting that if Leia goes on to that point, that she's going to just... they're going to double up on that point anyway. So... I do always like seeing the Empire characters on this black and red table. It always looks pretty dope. Yeah. Donovan's just examining that he just doesn't really have a perfect play here. And there's going to be a little bit of just like seeing how dice go. I think he's going, the optimal situation might be to wound Baze and Chirrut, but with 2 potential revenge triggers, that's kind of scary. Yeah. Donovan doesn't want to spend too much time thinking, so he knows that he hasn't come up with a perfect plan. He's just going to go for his thought. All right. He moves down, make an attack on Chirrut. I believe he gets 1 extra die because it's melee from Gideon. Yep. And then going to coordinated fire strain. Always good to remember those. Looks like 3 fails on Donovan's side. 2 hits, 2 expertise, 1 crit. I love how he laid that out. Man, I'm going to compliment him on that later. I really appreciate that. He modifies the 2 expertise into 2 crits. He's realizing now that the right plan may have been to just try to shove Ezra off that point. Five damage, pin, and expose. Okay. So he gains a momentum, and then one of the Inquisitors needs to heal. Now there's some interesting decisions for interesting choices for where the revenge triggers go. There's no one on the back point, so it looks like Cassian is going to be able to advance and just take that point from the bottom level. So Cassian moved from his own trigger. Oh, I remember this moment now. I got called over for this. So what Leia wants to dash towards Fifth Brother, but Leia needs to move towards the attacking character. So this is interesting from both sides, because if Donovan had thought about it, he could have moved at an even worse angle for Leia. And so obviously probably not something he was thinking about in the moment. I don't think I would have. Bright red hat on the screen. The red Oakley hat is a good sign that Omnis is involved. So what's going on right here is trying to get, obviously there's just a little bit of parallax, trying to figure out what is the perfect angle, just to make sure we got the angle right. And so here I'm trying to go, Chris, this is the widest short move. This is the widest that you can take. And this would be something that he would be able to check. Judge is not going to step in and like give you information that you wouldn't have. And so he looks and he's like, yeah, I don't think that gets me what I want. And then he realizes, oh, I'm just going to dash down the other direction, hit the ladder. Yeah. Yeah. This is definitely an interesting one, because I know that some communities will play that you don't measure from that side of the door, you measure from the side of the door where the ladder is on, but that really varies from community to community. But I believe both Vancouver and Pacific Northwest, like our region, tends to measure from the doorway. It's actually something I plan on marking on that, to actually have a spot where you can very clearly see where you measure that from. All right. So, despite getting a wound, taking 2 points, he then loses 2 points. So only scores 3. I think he realized there was a chance he lost the Leia point, but I think he did not realize, he kind of lost track of Cassian and didn't think of Cassian going back to that other point. So that was Leia's tactic, moving a rebel. And she's in kind of an awkward spot, because if she leaves that point, Fifth Brother gets to that point back. So she spends the Force. So he uses that to dash herself. This is not a focus for a dash. She was spending the Force for the dash, then heal 1 off of, looks like, Ezra. Looks like shooting at the, is that Dark Trooper over there? Just 2 blocks. So he does get the wound on the Dark Troopers, so he gets some momentum, but he's realizing it's not enough to take the point because the Gideon and Ezra are both on the same point, and because it is his turn, he moves. Yeah. Yeah. Real. Yeah, Chris is talking about how he thought he was going to be able to take that point. Yeah. Yeah. I think the only thing I would have liked differently on that turn, because it looks like he rolled dice like he had focused, and I think he would have just should have focused in, and then he would have rolled the right amount of dice, and then just got to move someone else, and I guess he wouldn't have gotten the heal on Ezra that way. He had the extra action either way, so it doesn't negatively affect the game state. But it might also have been I just missed that he said focus. It is a very loud convention hall. But I always got to try to point out mistakes if I see them, because otherwise people will just point them out in chat. I'll see all my comments will be like, oh, you missed this. Okay. So Donovan pulls 5th brother. Now he has reserved him and pulls Grand Inquisitor, which I think is totally fine because Baze and Chirrut are already wounded, so it is safe for Grand Inquisitor to leave that point. I find it a little strange that Donovan is not using the red side of the token, but I think that comes from he plays me a lot, and I will often take the red side. So I think he's just used to playing the blue side of the token. So Donovan now is just checking like some potential dashes for his other Inquisitors. I gotta admit, Donovan's selling me on this list a little bit. Like, I might have to try this. Realizing that Chris has pretty much maxed out his momentum. Looks like he can gain one more. So having it continuing to end on Donovan's side is going to stop helping Chris if he cannot, like, make a big swing on objectives. All right. So he goes and dashes 5th brother. He accidentally nudged Leia, so they're just fixing that a little bit. Now, what is the best play for Grand Inquisitor? He's resolving the free dash. I think he's realizing he needs to be on that point because even though he's controlling it right now, it's going to be a thing where he would lose it this turn because it's 1-1 and the Ezra tie would swing in his favor this turn. So coordinated fire strain, attack in. Yeah. So it was the tactics dash, move to the ladder, now coordinated fire strain, attack into Ezra. Looks like 2 fails on Grand Inquisitor. Expertise becomes like a crit and a hit, so it looks like After blocks, he ends up with 2 crits and a hit going through, plus the strain. Yeah. Yeah. Donovan realizes that the coordinated fire strain does cost force now. And even though he didn't realize at the time, he's like, yeah, I'll go ahead and spend the force. Yeah. So it looks like Ezra did not roll enough expertise for a dash. So he ends up getting Ezra off, takes the struggle. Oh, and now it's time for "This Town is Ready to Blow!" The thing that everybody hates about Cassian. I think it's crits and hits. So it ends up being 2 damage on everybody. Well, everybody who's on a point, which is a lot of damage spread around. So Grand Inquisitor took 2, Fifth Brother took 2, Gideon took 2. So now Chris is picking which of the 2 that he wants to take. All right. Not quite a line down the middle, but pretty close to it. But that's not a bad flip for Chris. Nobody's on the middle. Cassian's already at least controlling the back. It's the block symbol, which means that's where he's already controlling. He gets Ezra back. I think this is solid for him. It's not great that he's strained, but I think you would just be really unhappy if you got Cassian or Leia right here. Would be kind of annoying. Looks like he is debating whether or not he wants to reserve. I would be very nervous about reserving here, but that should be news to no one, as I tend to get very nervous about reserving in general. I kind of think here you get Ezra to the middle. He could choose to just heal the strain, advance, jump, and then be on the middle and score 4. But he's electing to take the 3 strain damage. I think he's seeing red a little bit, like how much damage is spread around, that maybe he wants to get that attack in and just get it so Donovan can't be controlling so many points. But I think there was a world there where you heal the strain and then just go get on the point. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a ladder that goes all the way up right over there. So he's able to jump, hit the ladder, and then go up to the middle. And he does still have an action left, so he's going to take a shot on someone. He's realizing Reva's already wounded, doesn't need to shoot her. He elects he's going to go ahead and take a shot at Moff Gideon. Gideon's going to block 3. He just factors in how much he's getting from the expertise, move those aside with the hit that gets blocked. Calculating damage. Ends up doing a pin, 3 damage, and healing himself. for 3. All right, he scores 4. This is probably a spot where I'd be heavily considering like giving up this struggle and just trying to be ready for the next one. But it's interesting on Sabotage because just because of the nature of the objectives, you kind of want to like take objectives from your opponent anyway. There's not enough different ones that you kind of always have to put on pressure as opposed to just moving to different ones. Yeah. So tactics, dash off the pin. They're just kind of backing up a little bit and rolling for priority. Donovan's accepting. He's like, I'm not making decisions around priority here. I'm just going for positioning and planning for the next struggle. This was a focused attack into. I think it was a focused attack into Ezra. He scores no points, gains momentum. Definitely giving up that struggle. Rolls for priority. It's going to be the fail symbol. Rebel Commandos card comes up now. I think when you're in Chris's spot right now, you're going, okay, I'm winning this struggle, but we've got to be positioned right for the next one. Do you want to conserve wounds? Do you want to soften people up? Like, what do you want to do with this turn? It can be a very delicate decision and can absolutely change games because you've got Fifth Brother low on health. You've got Gideon low on health. You've got Death Trooper Escort low on health. So it looks like 5 blocks. I'm not sure who the Rebel Commando was shooting. So it's got to be the Rebel Commando that's not engaged. Okay, so it was the Rebel Commando that was on the midline was shooting at the engaged Fifth Brother and does go far enough down to get a shove through. And it is enough to wound Fifth Brother, it looks like. That has now made it so the other one is not engaged. Marking momentum because he got a wound on Fifth Brother. Yep. Donovan slightly regretting not using Long Live the Empire to kill Fifth Brother and get him back to full. All right. Really rough flip for Donovan here. Looks like he's currently controlling 1 point and is starting off with Chris controlling 2. So I think that was definitely a good flip for Chris. You know, being able to start with just got Fifth Brother off a point. And it's the block. It's right there where he's got 2 guys. This means he's like, all right, I have Fifth Brother in reserve. This is definitely the time to get him back into the swing of things. He kind of wants to go after that point anyway. He has a pretty reasonable chance to get up there and shove the Rebel Commandos off. He's going ahead and uses the climb action, not a jump, to conserve force. He was checking here. He did not. Big lightsaber attack into the Rebel Commando. He was double checking the Gideon card, it looks like, to make sure he was getting bonus dice. He does not want to kill the Rebel Commandos. So he's just choosing to pause at 1 down his tree, and he does 2 damage after his expertise and a shove. They've already activated. He doesn't want to wound them and let characters move around. There'd be a risk that Leia moves and then shoves fifth brother off. Yeah. Okay. Looks like Donovan scores 3 there. So, solid. It is mission critical now, so that's why he scored a momentum. Flip Cassian. I'm not sure this is what Chris would want here. Because he's rolled priority. It's the fifth brother spot. I mean, maybe that's fine. Because I believe he can dash. I can't remember if that spot over there is the spot that doesn't have a double ladder. So it might not actually be possible for him to dash the Rebel Commando up back onto that point with Cassian. And Cassian is your guy who's already holding a point. So he is activating Cassian. Cassian is spending a force to dash himself plus someone else. Just waiting to see who he's going to dash. He dashes the Rebel Commando that was more towards the middle. Oh, just realizing now that it's actually Sabine over there holding the point. I lost track of where Cassian was at. So that was Cassian kind of moved towards the block objective. So this is not too bad for him. Cassian can definitely get up there and help take that, and then Ezra is moving towards a relevant objective. So that's a much better play than what I realized, but when I had confused where Sabine and Cassian actually were. So 3 blocks for Donovan. Expertise got him a crit and a hit to crit. He realizes the 1 shove won't matter, so he does 3 damage and disarm. Then he goes and hits a ladder, comes up to take that point, and scores 3. They both get a momentum for ending on 0, and then he gets 1 for mission critical. Just realized they forgot the town is ready to blow at the end of Struggle 2. All right. Perfect time for the Shatterpoint for Donovan. He's definitely got to take that point from Sabine, but that's not difficult. I'm curious if this is a Reva turn, where Reva could have fifth brother try to knock Cassian off. Oh, it looks like... Oh, he's deciding. Yeah, so he is going to go ahead and do Reva. Let's see if I'm predicting correctly. He's starting to second guess this exact play because Fifth Brother is disarmed. So Reva's giving Fifth Brother a dash and an attack. So he is doing the play. Obviously, it is a little bit worse with a disarm. 4 hits, but it looks like Cassian's going to block all of it. Yeah. Yeah. So they're just refreshing a force because you realize that he is using the Shatterpoint, so he does get a force back. But the 4 hits and a fail into 4 or 5 blocks and a heal does nothing to Cassian, so he's not taking that back point. I still think that was the right play. I'm not sure I see something that was definitively better, and definitely sets up Reva going and hitting a ladder and getting up on that objective and taking the important point, and so he can score 3. She still had an action left, so she hunkers. Scores 3, gains a momentum. We're going to come down to the wire with Mission Critical rolling. Expertise is the point over with Gideon and I think GI is? No, GI is not on that point. DTE, I think. DTE and Dark Trooper. All right, Chris pulls Sabine. That's a perfectly reasonable play here. I mean, I think the question you'd be asking yourself in this moment is reserving worth it? Probably not with Gideon. But is there like a reasonable odds that you could pull someone that could take the priority point? Because that's really key. Because the rolling the expertise in this moment is a really big deal in Donovan's favor. And that can just happen sometimes when you have 2 players of this caliber playing each other. Sometimes, like, the priority rolls can be that tiny nudge that kind of swings something in one person's favor or not. So I don't begrudge Chris for like taking a little bit of time here trying to figure out if this is the right play. He is spending the 2 force to reserve. He thinks he needs a shot at that other side of the table. Yeah. Reserves gets Shatterpoint. That's as much as you could possibly ask for. He's going to get to refresh a force here too. So that's, I think, a big payoff for him here where this could potentially keep him in the game. He's Shatterpointing Baze and Churret. Don't begrudge him that decision at all. That seems perfect here. That gets him a key support active again, and they're on the side of the table to make big impact. You've got 7 damage on Gideon, so they've got a strong chance at a wound. There's a lot of swing potential coming out of this turn, so I imagine Chris is ecstatic that he hit the Shatterpoint. I mean, I'm sure you'd been totally happy with just Baze and Churret coming up anyway, but the fact that it was the Shatterpoint and Cassian's going to give them extra dice is even bigger deal. Yeah. So here, Baze and Churret always refresh a force. Then they can refresh another force for the fact that they have an injured token, or they can remove a condition. And so he's thinking here that maybe it's worthwhile to go ahead and just get the condition off. I think he's go ahead and take off the strain instead of getting the extra force. He's spending 2. I believe this is going to be to give one of them. Yeah, he gives one of them a reposition. So Churret's getting the reposition. He's going to hit that ladder, I think, that's underneath. Oh, no, he just moves under, and now they're climb action. The only ladder was ladder within reach was kind of blocked, so that's why he just did the climb action. Now flipping sides for the free focus. Chirrut into the Death Trooper escort. Yeah, it's going to be 10 dice with Cassian's bonus. I love how Donovan has just got such a smooth tone here. He knows bad things are happening to his characters in a top 8 game that's going to determine whether he hits top 4. But he is staying calm and collected. Chris just always seems like he's just having a blast. 3 blocks for the Death Trooper escort. I don't think that's going to matter. Ends up being 4 damage, a shove, and a pin. Not quite a kill with protection. But I believe that does get him off the point, and he's pinned. All right, now Baze is going into Moff. Just 2 blocks from Moff. I think this is a good situation where you're like, Moff is dying anyway. Like, if you're going to have a bad defense roll, this is the time to get it out of the way. So, looks like Baze is going to full tree into Moff. Baze never lets down. I don't know why that is, but Baze is the guy who just, always seems to have the better attack roll on that unit. So, sounds like 6 damage, pin, shove. So at this point, they are saying that there is a shove, but they're not confident that he can get off the point. So he's getting wounded, so he's not affecting the scoring, but they called me over just to see if Gideon could get off the point, because it is pretty tight. Yeah. So, yeah. Honestly, I was really questioning whether to have it, but it looks like he is just barely going to have the shove as well. Not sure how relevant that is. Might actually be a thing that could hurt him, shoving off a character there, or maybe it could occupy space that maybe Donovan wants to get into. They're hitting a point where there's just not a lot of space left. Okay. So it looks like so he uses his tactics to cure pin. Goes up the ladder. And so that was the spending force for movement. And then he does a climb action to move up there. And that puts him on the point. Fifth brother is alive. He's not bothering making an attack. He's just doing a recover. Yep. Scores 3. Mission critical, gives him the last point. That closes out the game. I definitely can see in moments like that where some people might choose to still make an attack and potentially risk the moment. Just some very clean movement play to close out the game. I think he was definitely happy that was the priority point compared to where Baze and Chirrut were at. So definitely some great priority roles to super impact that last struggle for them. But man, such a fantastic game. Big shout out to both Donovan and Chris for letting me record them. That was a really tight match. I feel like a lot of times that could have really gone either way. And it was a very cool matchup to see Cassian and Leia with one revenge trigger the entire game. You know, that's obviously a big part of their kits and where a lot of their power comes from. And Donovan played very reserved, kept focus on just scoring and playing his list in a very like controlled displacement, tiebreaker focused build. Very interesting to see the strains from the Dark Troopers, also huge impact there. And just so much protection and stuff in his list, I think really helped kind of keep him going for quite a while. Overall, just fantastic game. Donovan comes out ahead there, advances to the top 4. Not really a surprise for any of us that Donovan kind of hits that. He was top 2 the year before, played in the finals. Absolutely fantastic player, but I'm only gaining more and more respect for Chris the more I see how he plays and what he puts into his decisions. So he's definitely a person that I'd love to get a game with in the future. But overall, I think we're just going to wrap it up here. To everyone who's watching this show, appreciate you supporting the channel any way you can, liking, subscribing. If you're already subscribed to the podcast and stuff, you know I appreciate you. But we'll just close it out here and just say the most OP thing that you can do is get out to a GT and represent for your favorite primaries. Later, nerds.